Hey guys, it's Jo back on Trauma Talk with my good friend Katie. She is actually a counselor. I've had a few counselors on already, which is awesome, but she's an addictions counselor and trauma counselor specifically. And she's going to talk to us today about something that is really important, especially if you are in currently an abusive relationship or think that you might be, which is safety planning. She's also a survivor of domestic violence and has had experience with this, and so is going to talk to us about why it is so important to have a safety plan in place before you leave a relationship.
So essentially what I've been doing is I've been working in addiction specifically, but also trying to help people get to the root of how addiction starts.
Yeah.
And so essentially what I've been finding is that a lot of it is relationship-based, attachment-based, and trauma-based. And so a lot of the groups that I've been developing and working on at work have been different types of groups on how to form healthy connections to get ourselves out of addictive cycles, as well as implementing healthy coping mechanisms that maybe we haven't used before. And this works the same way as with anxiety and depression and PTSD symptoms and things like that as well. And huge basis in healthy relationships and building healthy relationships.
Okay, awesome. And you are, as you and I have talked about many times, a survivor of domestic violence yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that something that I haven't talked about on this channel before, but something that is insanely important when it comes to getting out of violent relationships is having a safety plan for escaping those relationships. And I know that you sort of had one in place when you left that relationship in your life. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened and then how you got out of that relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. So the interesting thing, I don't know if you'd call it interesting, but I was just basically a kiddo when that experience was going down, about between 14 and 18. And when I had had enough and I was ready to move on, I didn't know anything about safety planning, and I didn't know, how was I going to make this be over? Because at that point, that's all I wanted, was to just make it stop and to just move on with my life.
Yeah.
And him and I had conversations where I had said things like, this isn't working for me anymore, and I don't feel comfortable, I don't feel happy. And there would be that cycle that we always talk about where he would then buy gifts or tell me that things were going to be different for us then. And so for the longest time I was like, okay, like I really care about this person and I'm going to hang in there and make this work out. But push came to shove, literally, quite literally, and just kind of got tired of going through that chaotic cycle of violence. And I didn't know anything about safety planning, was planning just to take off.
Yeah.
But I started to try to feel him out a little bit because I knew him well enough to know that there were certain circumstances where he would snap and things would get dangerous for me.
Yes.
So I started by saying things like, I think we need to take a break, I think is what I said. I think I need some time apart. And he freaked out.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, well that doesn't feel safe. So I need to figure out something. And I essentially didn't tell anyone, what was going on or what my plan was, including him.
Yeah.
And I had just over the next, for a couple of weeks of time actually, was like building up money and resources and phone numbers and things like that, and started to slowly put like an escape plan together. And I went to work on, I don't remember what day, it was in the middle of the week though. I went to work like things were normal.
Okay. Yeah.
And basically told my boss a little bit about what was going on, and fooled my ex into thinking I was going to be at work all day, waited for him to go to work, left my job, went back to our apartment, packed all of my belongings, called some close friends and family members, had them pick up my stuff, and took off. And I didn't call him or text him or say anything, and just took all my things and put them out and, moved out.
Yeah.
And, was just moving on at that point.
Yeah.
And essentially that's what they tell you to do with safety plans is, put a plan into place where you can be protected and they don't know that anything's coming, because that direct, conversation can really be dangerous. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I feel blessed in that regard because I didn't have that information. It was just an intuition that I trusted.
Okay.
It was just a gut instinct that this is going to be too dangerous to just tell him that I'm done with this.
Yeah.
And so now, that's what we tell clients now, is that you cannot just leave a relationship like this. It's just not safe. You have to plan for it.
What are some good initial steps for safety planning? I know that you mentioned some that you took, but if someone was thinking about leaving a violent and unhealthy relationship, I mean, like, what's step one?
You know, essentially, it would just be to kind of figure out what exactly you want to do.
Okay.
So I think step one would be figuring out, where am I going to go?
Okay.
Before I start, you don't want to pack up your things. You know, you don't want to let anyone know that that's happening. You don't want to make any plans until you figure out, okay, once I get out, where am I going to go? You know, and in some cases, if it's extraordinarily dangerous and you don't feel safe, like your life is going to be threatened that very evening,
Yeah.
forget it. Don't make a plan of where you're going to go. Get in the car and get the hell out of there,
Yeah.
and then work on that.
Yeah.
You know, that piece, if you have the funds to do so. But I definitely think that for me, that first step was absolutely figuring out, where am I going to go? Where am I going to go now? And so if you don't have a close friend or family to stay with, then you can, you know, a shelter or a hotel or
Yeah.
somewhere that person isn't, you know, likely to know that that's where you're headed.
That makes sense. Okay.
And where you won't be alone. Where there will be
Right,
other
that
people.
makes sense too.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
having people around you.
Sure.
Did you have that after you left?
Yes. When the couple of times when I left for the evening, when things were getting too
Yeah.
rough, I went to a friend's house, or actually it was always a friend's house.
Yeah.
And they were always friends that had lots of friends there. So at this time, you know, we're
Okay.
18 at this time, so all these houses tend to have tons of roommates at them,
Yeah.
which made me feel extraordinarily safe at that point, because the likelihood that my ex was going to bust into one of these places with 10 other people in it and cause a scene is unlikely, right?
Yeah.
They don't want to lose face.
Yeah.
In general, that's been my experience, is that you're safer in public than you are behind closed doors.
Yes.
So if you can find someone to stay with, then generally you're going to be safer than if you go stay somewhere by yourself.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
If you were to like recommend a checklist to go through if you had time to plan a safety list, what
Sure.
would be some of the top items to go through?
Definitely important documents is one thing that I'll always recommend
That's a good one.
to
Okay.
clients, for sure. If you're in a hurry, you're not going to have time to find everything that you may need, because essentially what you're trying to plan for is, I mean, it's basically starting your life over again.
Yes.
So you want to have all your important documentation, so your driver's license and your social security card and your birth certificate, your children's birth certificates, maybe their vaccines, you know, things like that, your renter's agreements, if you own the home that you're leaving, you're going to want that paperwork, so
Yes.
you can hopefully get this other person out of that home and then, you know, be able to prove that you own it. If not, it's okay to leave that behind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the title to your car, the tax information, but essentially personal stuff is the most important, like your birth certificate, your social security card, and your driver's license.
Okay. So primarily.